So a normal distribution is actually a family of these different distributions. And it's a special type of mound-shaped distribution, so it's symmetric. And what makes it a normal distribution is that it follows a certain equation. And you don't need to know what the equation is, but you do need to know that a normal distribution is mound-shaped. And we'll talk about a different kind of mound-shaped distribution in the next phase, which is called a t-distribution. Okay? The center of the normal distribution depends on the mean, and the spread depends on the variance or the standard deviation. So here we have different normal distributions, and let's start with the blue one. The blue one has a mean of 0, so its center is at 0, and its variance is 0.2. So it's the least spread out of all of these distributions because its variance is the least. Then let's go to the red one. The red distribution is a normal distribution with a mean of 0, so it has the same center as the blue distribution, but it has a greater variance, so it's more spread out than the blue one. And we go to yellow. It also has the same center as the red and the blue, but it has an even greater variance than the red distribution. So it has a variance of 5, so it's really spread out. And then let's go to the green one. It's a little off-centered from the other ones, right? It has a mean of -2, so its center is at -2. And it looks like its variance is between the blue and the red one, right? It's somewhere in between. So the mean tells you the center, and the variance or the standard deviation tells you how spread out it is. So remember, standard deviation is just the square root of variance. So now I'm going to talk about the empirical rule. The empirical rule is for a normal distribution. It tells you specifically how much of the data is between certain standard deviations from the mean. So 68% of the data is within one standard deviation above and below the mean. 95% are within 2 standard deviations above and below the mean, and 99.7, or almost all of it, is within 3 standard deviations from the mean. So this is why we use the standard deviation instead of the mean absolute deviation, if you remember this from a past video, but you don't have to remember that. But because we use standard deviation, we can specifically tell you how much of the data is within so much of the mean if we know it's a normal distribution. Okay? And these rules are derived from calculus, but you really don't need to know about that. But if you do know calculus, we get these rules from integrals, of taking the integral of the normal distribution equation. So now I'm going to talk about the empirical rule, but with z-scores. So instead of saying one standard deviation, we can just talk about the z-scores. So 68% of the data is between z-scores of -1 and 1, because remember, z-scores tell you how many standard deviations we are below or above the mean. Okay? And then 95% of the data is between z-scores of -2 and 2, and 99.7, or almost all, is between z-scores of -3 and 3.